All right, ready for a deep dive? Today, we're winding back the clock. 2007. The year Steve Jobs introduced the world to the iPhone, and we're going right to the source, his original keynote address.
It's one thing to know the iPhone was a game changer, but to actually go back to hear Jobs lay out his vision as it was happening, it really is like a time capsule.
So paint the picture for us. 2007, what's the tech scene look like before the iPhone took over,
Blackberries everywhere. And not the sleek kind. We're talking clunky with the tiny keyboards,
Ah.
internet on your phone. Oh, it existed, but good luck doing much with it. And styluses, those were still a thing.
Right. It's easy to forget how revolutionary the iPhone actually was.
Totally. And Jobs plays into that. He starts by connecting the iPhone to Apple's whole thing. The Macintosh, the iPod, products that didn't just join the market but completely flipped the script.
Didn't he use the word revolutionary about 1,000,000 times in that keynote?
At least he knew how to build the hype, and you could tell, even back then, people were ready for something revolutionary.
So let's get into it. The big reveal. He doesn't just pull out a phone, does he? It's more than that.
He's way too smart for that. He starts by calling out all the problems with existing smartphones. Too complicated, too focused on cramming in features instead of, actually working well. He even puts up this slide of all these other phones, just a jumble of buttons and menus.
It's brutal, like he's putting them all on blast.
Yeah, it's classic Jobs, right? He's framing it as Apple versus the world. And their solution, it's elegant, it's simple, it just makes sense. He lays out what people actually want from a mobile device. A widescreen iPod with touch controls, but also a revolutionary mobile phone and a breakthrough internet communicator. And then, bam.
The iPhone is born.
These are not three separate devices, he says. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone. I mean, can you imagine being in that room?
Electric. And that moment, when he holds up the actual iPhone, that screen, it dwarfed everything else.
Pure theater. He lets it sink in and just walks away. You can practically hear the audience holding their breath.
Okay, so it's sleek, it's multifunctional, but the real magic was the interface, right? No more stylus, just touch.
And Jobs knew this was huge. Remember, 2007, most people, they haven't experienced anything like multi-touch before.
He even goes as far as to call the human finger the best pointing device in the world. Obvious in hindsight, sure. But back then,
A total game changer, and he demos it so perfectly. Scrolling through music with a flick, zooming into photos with a pinch. It's like watching magic.
it's interesting though, he addresses the skeptics head on. He knew people were used to physical keyboards to buttons. He even takes a jab at plastic keyboards, saying they limit what you can do.
And then boom, he contrasts that with the iPhone, this beautiful giant touch screen, just your fingers making it dance.
And it wasn't just about the hardware. He makes a big deal about the software. He even says it's 5 years ahead of anything else out there. Was he being serious? Or was that just classic Jobs hype?
Well, he did have a bit of a reputation for bending reality, but he wasn't totally off base here. It wasn't just about making things look pretty. Apple wanted the whole experience to be intuitive. He spends a good chunk of that keynote just showing off things like visual voicemail. Imagine that. Nobody had seen that before.
Mind-blowing, right? No more having to listen through 1,000,000 spam messages just to find that one important one.
Right. And then there's the Safari demo. He loads up websites like New York Times, Amazon, and they look like they do on a computer, not some stripped-down mobile version.
He makes sure to point that out, too. He keeps using this phrase, desktop-class applications. He even takes a jab at other mobile operating systems, calls them baby software, compared to what Apple was doing with OS X.
He was laying it on thick, for sure. But again, there's truth to it. Apple, they were taking what they knew about desktop operating systems and bringing that to mobile.
And Jobs really hammers home that Apple is different because they're in control of the whole thing, hardware and software. He even throws in that Alan Kay quote, "People who are really serious about software should make their own hardware."
Says it all right there. Apple wasn't content just making phones. They wanted to craft the entire experience, the chip, the software, everything.
And part of that was controlling those key partnerships, too.
Yeah.
He brings both the CEO of Yahoo and the CEO of Google out on stage. Talk about a power move. What made those partnerships so important?
This is where you see Jobs' strategy. Don't forget, this is pre-App Store, so whatever the iPhone launched with, that was it. It had to be killer.
And those partnerships were huge. Free push email from Yahoo, that was a big deal back then, especially for anyone using their phone for work. BlackBerry was still king.
And Jobs, he knew he had to give people a real reason to switch.
And then there's Google Maps. Mobile maps before the iPhone, let's just say they weren't great. And then Jobs, he's up there showing off Google Maps on the iPhone. It's smooth, it actually works.
So simple, but so revolutionary for the time. Another chance for Jobs to dig at the competition, too. Called their internet browsing experiences crippled.
He really wants everyone to know the iPhone is playing a whole different game. All this innovation must come with a hefty price tag, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the way Jobs reveals the price, marketing genius.
He goes on this whole thing about how much the iPhone should cost. Like, he breaks it down. The price of a separate iPod, a phone, a data plan.
Gets you thinking it's going to be like $1,000 at least, right?
At least. And then, boom, $499. The crowd goes wild.
Totally played everyone. He set the bar so high, the real price seemed like a bargain. Even throws in a last-minute price cut, the 8GB model, down to $499 from $599.
Like, he's doing us a favor. And of course, the keynote wouldn't be complete without that classic one more thing moment. Apple Computer, he announces, is dropping the computer. From now on, it's just Apple.
Bold move. It was like he was saying, Apple's not just about computers anymore. They're going after the whole world of mobile, of consumer tech.
It's like he threw down a gauntlet. The future is mobile, he's saying, and Apple's leading the charge. But did he actually know back then just how big the iPhone was going to be?
Jobs was a showman, sure. But his confidence, it wasn't an act. He really believed the iPhone is going to change everything. Remember that bit with the market share slide?
Oh yeah, with all the different devices. Game consoles, digital cameras.
Yeah.
And then there's mobile phones.
Yeah.
1 billion units sold just in 2006.
Right. He lays it out so simply. If Apple can just snag 1% of that market, that's 10 million iPhones. He knew the potential was huge, even if they didn't hit those numbers right away, which, well...
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, they did, to say the least. But back then, it was still a risk. There were already a ton of smartphones out there.
And Apple was the new guy.
But Jobs, he loved that. Remember how he ends the keynote with that Wayne Gretzky quote, "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been." That's Apple in a nutshell. They weren't afraid to shake things up,
right,
to be disruptive.
And disrupt. They did. It's almost impossible to imagine the world before the iPhone. The way we communicate, the way we consume information, it all changed, basically overnight.
Completely. And looking back at that keynote now, it's so clear. Jobs wasn't just selling a phone, he was selling a vision, this idea that technology could be more intuitive, more human.
He was saying, come with me, it's going to be amazing.
And it was. That's the thing about that keynote. It's about so much more than just specs and features. It's about how powerful ideas can be, how they can shape the future.
So after spending some time with this little piece of tech history, what's the biggest takeaway for you? Why does this keynote from 17 years ago still matter today?
It reminds me that real innovation, it comes from thinking differently, from challenging the way things have always been done, and from being brave enough to imagine something totally new. That's a lesson for anyone, really, not just tech companies.
Makes you wonder, what's the iPhone of today? What's going to sneak up on us and change everything we thought we knew? Something to think about. Until next time.